Superior Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Mark Lemieux presiding.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Please be seated. One of these times I'm going to knock on the door. I'm just not going to come out. Let's see what you guys do.
Come after you. Stay here.
All right, we're back on the record. This is State of New Jersey versus Paul Caneiro. It's indictment 19-02-0283. Can I have the appearances of counsel for the record?
Your Honor, Assistant Prosecutor Nicole Wallace on behalf of the state.
Good morning, Judge Chris Tucker, Assistant Monmouth County Prosecutor for the state.
Good morning, Your Honor. Monica Masterlin on behalf of Mr. Paul Caneiro, who's present.
Judge, good morning. Andy Murray, Paul Caneiro.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Caneiro.
Good morning, Your Honor.
All right, the state can call their next witness, please.
Thank you, Judge. The state calls Danielle Reid.
Watch your step. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Should have said something. If you don't mind, put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand once you get comfortable. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Once you're comfortable and seated, can you state your full name for the record and spell your last name, please?
Good morning. My name is Danielle Reid, and that's D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E-R-E-E-D.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Prosecutor, when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Ms. Reid.
Good morning.
What do you do for a living?
I was, until very recently, I was a senior DNA analyst.
Okay, and where did you work?
I worked at Bode Technology.
And what was your role there?
My role was to be assigned cases from crimes and from outside agencies that needed help with forensic DNA testing. We would receive cases and they would be assigned to me, and I would process them or help them process through the lab as managing it. I would do analysis and interpretation and issue a final report as well as testify to any results.
Okay, so just to be clear, are you a forensic DNA analyst?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and what kind of a lab is Bode?
Bode is a private forensic DNA laboratory.
And where is that located?
It's in Lorton, Virginia.
I'd like to discuss your professional and educational background, if I could. Do you have something called a CV?
Yes, I do.
Show me, counsel, what's marked as S495. I'm showing you what's been marked as S495. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Or what is that?
That's my CV.
If you could tell the jury about your educational background.
I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Criminology and Criminal Justice and a Bachelor's of Science in Physiology and Neurobiology, and both of those are from the University of Maryland at College Park.
Now, to become a forensic DNA analyst, were there certain courses you were required to take?
Yes, there are.
What was that?
They are biochemistry, genetics, statistics, and molecular biology.
Can you tell the jury about your prior professional experience as it relates to your profession as a DNA analyst?
As I had some molecular techniques that I did while I was a biological science aide for the United States Department of Agriculture. It's where I got my basic training and learning from. And then from there, I went straight to Bode.
Okay. And what did you do at Bode when you first arrived? And when did you get to Bode, I should ask?
I started in March of 2005, and I was working in our data banking group, which is processing convicted felons' profiles to be put into a database.
Now, ultimately, did you get promoted at Bode?
Yes.
Can you tell us about the promotions that you received throughout the years there?
So you start off as an analyst 1, and then you go from analyst 1, 2, 3, all the way up to a senior DNA analyst.
And what are the differences between the different
analyst roles?
Time you take on more responsibilities, more project management, and you take on training of other individuals, as well as doing technical review of other individuals' work.
And do you belong to any professional memberships?
I do. I belong to the American Association of Forensic Sciences, and I'm also licensed under the Texas Department of Public Safety.
Now, does Bode utilize STARmix?
Yes, they do.
And does it also utilize manual interpretation?
Yes, we do.
Have you been trained in STARmix?
I have.
Can you describe that training?
The process started with a 4-day workshop with the creators of STARmix, where we went through the basics of how it works and learning how to use it. After that, we went through a training at Bode, which included reading many journal articles and readings on the topic, as well as multiple lectures. And then we would do a training set, multiple training sets to ensure that we learn the process. And then we would do a verbal and written competency test, as well as doing a moot court.
Now, did Bode Lab validate STARmix?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and are you familiar somewhat with that validation?
Yes, we were required to read the validation for training,
And how long did that validation take?
many years.
When did Bode go live with STARmix or begin using it in casework?
It was in 2018.
Now, approximately how many DNA samples
Have you processed and analyzed over the course of your career?
At this point, hundreds of thousands.
How many times have you testified in court with regards to the your conclusions and analysis of those samples?
I think this is my 62nd time.
And what jurisdictions did you testify in?
I have testified in Maryland, New York, California, Alaska, Tennessee, Florida, Massachusetts, and Texas.
Were you qualified as a forensic, as an expert in forensic DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
Okay, how many times?
Oh,
Judge, at this time, the state seeks to have this witness qualified as an expert in forensic DNA analysis.
No objection.
You know it's coming. Okay. As a general rule, witnesses can only testify to facts known by them. This rule ordinarily does not permit to be received as evidence the opinion of a witness who is not testifying as an expert. However, an exception to this rule exists in the case of an expert witness who may give their opinion as to any matter in which they are versed, which is material to the case. In legal terminology, an expert witness is a witness who has some special skill, knowledge, experience, or training that is not possessed by the ordinary juror, and who thus may be able to provide assistance to the jury in understanding the evidence presented and determine the facts in the case. You are not bound by such expert's opinion, but you should consider the opinion and give it the weight to which you deem it is entitled, whether that be great or slight, or you may reject it. In examining an expert's opinion, you may consider the reasons given for it, if any, and you may also consider the qualifications and credibility of the expert. It is always within the special function of the jury to determine whether the facts on which the answer or testimony of an expert is based actually exist. The value or weight of the opinion of the expert is dependent upon and is no stronger than the facts on which it is based. In other words, the probative value of the opinion will depend upon whether from all of the evidence in the case you find that those facts are true. You may in fact determine from the evidence in the case that the facts that form the basis of the opinion are true, are not true, or are true in part only. And in light of those findings, you should decide what effect such determination has upon the weight to be given to the opinion of the expert. Your acceptance or rejection of the expert opinion will depend, therefore, to some extent, on your findings as to the truth of the facts relied upon. You and you alone are the sole fact finders in this case. You must be persuaded solely by the evidence presented at trial when determining whether the state has satisfied its burden. As the sole judges of the facts, you are to determine the credibility of the various witnesses as well as the weight to be afforded to their testimony to determine whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt all elements of the crimes charged. So I just want to remind you, at the end of the case, you guys have to be able to cite that fact to me. You got it? Everybody got it? All right, good. All right, with that being said, we'll qualify this witness as an expert in forensic DNA analysis. Go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Reid, is Bode Lab accredited?
Yes, we are.
By what organization?
They are accredited by an organization called ANAB, which is an acronym within an acronym. So it's ANSI, National Accreditation Board, and then ANSI stands for American National Standards Institute.
And what does it mean for Bode that it's accredited?
It means that we have been audited and found to be following all of the guidelines that has been accepted in the community as to produce quality, consistent results.
Now, how is it that evidence is received into Bode Lab?
We receive it either by hand-to-hand contact transfer or by FedEx, UPS. It will be received or delivered to our evidence department, where they will accession it into our system, into a secure facility, where they will assign it a Bode case number. From then, it will be assigned to an analyst for processing.
Now, what kinds of safeguards does Bode apply to ensure the integrity of evidence?
We have a secure facility that limits the number of personnel that are allowed in the facility. We also make sure that the evidence that we receive is not been tampered with in any way before being received at our office. So we make sure that all of the seals are intact, and we process all of our evidence and references completely separately to make sure that there is no contamination between them.
Now, with respect to maintaining quality assurance standards, what kind of system is in place in terms of review of other analysts' work?
So we do 3 layers of review. There is the initial self-review, which is where the reporting analyst will look over their case file and make sure that it's as accurate as possible before they submit it in for technical review. Once it goes into technical review, another trained analyst will then review it, all of the work in every page within the case file, to make sure that it was done accurately. And then after that, if any comparisons are being made, an additional person will do what's called an administrative review to make sure that the conclusions are accurate and that there's not typos in the report.
Now, turning to the present case, were you assigned to perform DNA analysis on certain items of evidence relating to the state of New Jersey versus Paul Caneiro?
I was.
How many batches of evidence did you perform testing on?
We received 2 different batches of evidence on 2 different dates, as well as some submitted profiles.
Now, did you document your work and your analyses and conclusions in reports?
Yes, I did.
How many reports?
It was two reports, and then my work was 2 different reports, yes.
I'm showing counsel what's been marked as S496 and S498 and S464. Ms. Reid, I'm going to approach you with those documents. I'm going to ask if you could look at S496 first, and if you recognize it.
Yes, this is my report.
And what is the date on that report?
The date on this report is November 19th, 2021.
Is there a lab number on there?
Yes, the Bode lab number is CCA 2076-0119.
Okay. Now, did that report go through technical review by another analyst?
Yes, it did.
Okay. What, if anything, did Bode receive on June 4th of 2020 from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office?
On June 4th, we received already developed profiles for Jennifer Caneiro, Jesse Caneiro, Sophia Caneiro, and Keith Caneiro, and Paul Caneiro.
When you say already developed profiles, what are you referring
It
to?
means that another laboratory has already done the lab work, and they have just provided us with the profiles that they developed.
So the allele tables?
It's the allele tables.
Now, what, if anything, did Bode receive on June 18th of 2020 from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office?
We received a pair of jeans, and then 6 gloves, a knife, and 3 different swabs from areas within a kitchen.
Okay, now I'm going to ask if you recognize S498, which is in front of you.
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
This is the case submission form that we will receive from the client that details who the report will go to, who the evidence will go back to, as well as billing information, case background, and a list of the items that they would like tested.
And is there a lab number on that form?
Yes,
Does it correspond with the lab number on your report?
yes, it does.
Okay, and if you could look at S464 and tell us if you recognize that. And what is that?
This is the chain of custody for the evidence that was received on June 18th, 2020.
And is that with respect to the evidence that you just described?
Yes,
And is that same lab case number on that document?
yes, it is.
If you could turn to your report, would you be able to itemize the evidence for us that you tested as it's listed on your report, starting with EO1?
Yes, so we have EO1, which was a pair of jeans. We took 3 different samples from those jeans. One would be EO1A, which would be from the interior thigh above the knee for both legs of the pants.
Can I just ask you, I'm sorry, you said interior?
Interior thigh,
Thank
yes.
you.
EO1B was the interior waistband, and EO1C was an area that was designated Area 1, which was on the exterior front right thigh, and it had some red-brown staining.
Now, that item, EO1, the jeans, does that, on your report, does it correlate to any other item that is listed from the New Jersey State Police?
The agency sample ID is 180861-13-1 or a New Jersey State Police item 6-1.
Thank you. If you could go on to the next item that you have on your report, which is EO2.
EO2 was a glove, one black glove, New Jersey State Police item 6311, and we took 2 samples, one from the exterior as the sample was received, and one from the interior.
So is EO2A the exterior?
Yes,
And EO2B is what?
the interior.
Okay. And how about EO3?
It was another black glove. This one was item number 6312, and EO3A was the exterior, and EO3B was the interior.
Now, were there a remaining number of gloves, in particular 4 gloves that you also tested?
Yes.
Do those gloves correlate, all of them, to New Jersey State Police number 6-3-4-2?
I have 6-3-2.
I'm sorry, -2. And if you could start with EO4 now?
Yes. It was also one black glove. The EO4A was the exterior of the glove, and EO4B was the interior. EO5 was another black glove, and EO5A was the exterior, and EO5B was the interior. EO6 was another black glove, and EO6A was the exterior, and EO6B was the interior. And EO7 was another black glove, which was EO7A was the exterior, EO7B was the interior.
Is there an EO8?
EO8 was a Microtech Ultra Tech double edge 3.4-inch automatic knife with a serial number of 88781.
Was anything done with that in terms of testing?
When we received the evidence and talked to the client, they had requested if there was any red-brown staining for it to be tested for blood. And when we opened up the package, there was no red-brown staining observed, so no testing was done on the knife.
Now, what about EO9?
EO9 was AMB swab which was a DNA swab of reddish stain from the south side of the kitchen island.
And how about E10?
E10 was AMC swab, which was a DNA swab of reddish stain from the lower kitchen cabinet.
And is there a last item number on there?
The E11 was an AMD swab, which was the DNA swab of reddish stain from the pull-out drawer just below the sink.
I'm going to ask if you could turn to page 5 of 9 of your report. What is that on page 5?
This is a table summarizing all of the results from the STARmix testing that was done in this case.
This time, Judge Estate would seek to publish page 5, which is S496.
Any objection?
No.
Okay, you can.
Ms. Reid, can you just take us through the top blue part of this table, if you could, where it says Bode item number, and if you could just explain to us what those items at the top in the blue mean.
Bode item number just corresponds to the item of the evidence that I listed previously on the first page of the report. The next column, which is the assumed number of contributors, refers to when I'm doing my analysis, I have to determine, to the best of my knowledge based on the evidence that I see, how many people are in this mixture or in this profile. And then the next column is for suitable contributors. Based on the amount of DNA that is present for each of the contributors, some of them may not be suitable for comparisons. So this will list the contributors that are suitable for each sample. And then the next 5 columns are just the name of the references that we're doing comparisons to. And then the final column, combination possible, refers to if we have a mixture of more than one individual and more than one of the references are showing support for being in that mixture, we run them together to see if it's possible for them to be there together.
Now this chart, does this chart contain all of the DNA analysis that you conducted on each and every sample, or does this just contain the STARmix results?
This only contains the STARmix results.
Okay. Nonetheless, the DNA analysis that you performed on the samples that aren't reflected in this chart that we talked about earlier, are they in your report?
They are.
And are you prepared to talk about those as well today?
Yes, I am.
If we could start with sample E01A, jeans anterior thigh above the knee. Can you just explain to us in particular where the sample came from?
It came from the interior thigh above the knee. So it was taken from basically a sampling, a scraping was taken from inside the pants, from above the knee in the thigh area, on the inside of both legs of the jeans.
What was the number of contributors that you called for this sample?
We found 3 contributors to be present.
Okay, and how about the ones that are suitable for comparison?
Only contributors 1 and 2 were suitable for comparisons.
And how come the third one is not?
There was too little data present for that 3rd contributor for us to make any conclusions on.
Did you make any visual exclusions in this case?
Yes, so Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith Caneiro were all visually excluded from this sample.
What does it mean to be visually excluded?
It means that I'm looking at the profile, either the STARmix deconvolution or the profile itself, and determining is it possible for this person to be present. And based on the profile and the STARmix deconvolution, we are saying that it's not possible for them to be there.
Were any comparisons made to Sophia Caneiro's reference sample?
Yes, so Sophia could not be visually excluded, so we would then do a calculation using STARmix to determine the likelihood ratio of her being present in that sample.
And what was that likelihood ratio?
The likelihood ratio was, I want to get the wording right. Assuming a mixture of 3 individuals, this mixture DNA profile obtained is at least 470 sextillion times more likely if it originated from Sophia Caneiro and 2 unknown unrelated individuals than if from 3 unknown unrelated individuals.
Did you make any comparisons to the reference sample for Paul Caneiro?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain what those were?
Assuming a mixture of 3 individuals, this mixture was at least 3.7 quintillion times more likely if it originated from Paul Caneiro and 2 unknown unrelated individuals than if from 3 unknown unrelated individuals.
When we're talking about those numbers, is there a way to give the jury an idea of how big those numbers are?
Yes, we have a verbal scale. So basically, anything that's around 1 would be considered to be uninformative. Anything between 1 and 100 is limited support. Between 100 and 10,000 is moderate support. 10,000 and a million is strong support. And then anything above 1 million is considered to be very strong support.
Now, where it says combination possible, do you see that?
Yes.
And it says, what does it say there?
It says yes.
What does that mean?
It means that since both profiles showed support for inclusion, we then ran them together to see if it was possible for them to be there in the mixture together.
And was it?
Yes, it was.
We could turn now to sample E01B. Is that on this chart?
It is not,
And why not?
because it was not run through STARmix.
Can you tell us about what if anything, you did with that sample?
A partial DNA profile was obtained, including at least 1 male contributor, but due to the limited data obtained, no conclusions could be made on the profile.
And that was from where?
That was from the interior waistband of the genes.
How about sample E01C?
E01C was a single source profile
Where did that come from?
that came from the area 1, which was the exterior front right thigh, a red-brown staining.
And what was the number of contributors that you called for this?
1 contributor.
Okay. And were they suitable for comparison?
Yes, that was.
Were any visual exclusions made?
Jennifer, Jesse, Keith, and Paul Caneiro were all excluded from that profile.
Okay. And were any comparisons made in this case?
Yes, Sophia Caneiro could not be excluded, so we ran STARmix to get a likelihood ratio.
And what was that?
The likelihood ratio was 2.1 septillion, at least 2.1 septillion times more likely if it was Sophia than an unknown person.
And this might be an obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Where it says combination possible NA,
It means that there's only 1 person in the profile, so it's not appropriate to think that someone else is there.
now is the next sample E02A on the chart?
It is not on the chart, no.
Okay. And what is sample E02A?
EO2A is the the exterior of glove 6311.
And why isn't it on the chart?
We initially tried to interpret it using STARmix, but due to the great difference in the percentage of contribution, the software wasn't able to deconvolute or interpret the mixture properly. So because it wasn't able to do that, we went back and did it manually.
And when you ran it manually or you analyzed it manually, what if any conclusions did you draw from that?
The DNA profile obtained is consistent with a mixture of 2 individuals, including a major female contributor. The probability of randomly the deduced major component DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Sophia Caneiro. And
Did you give a statistic?
yes, the
What
probability.
was this? I was going
Sorry.
to ask you before that. So we heard about likelihood ratios just now. What statistic did you use for this interpretation?
We did something called random match probability
And why is that? Why is the statistic different?
because we did manual interpretation instead of using the STARmix software.
Okay, and what was that statistic?
The probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual with this DNA profile is at least 1 in 14 octillion in the United States population.
We could turn to sample E02B. Now,
Yes.
what sample is that?
EO2B is the interior of that same glove.
And what was your call for the number of contributors?
We determined there was 2 contributors there.
Were they both suitable for comparison?
Yes, they were.
Were any visual exclusions made?
Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith Caneiro were all visually excluded.
Okay, and what if any comparisons were then made?
Sophia Caneiro could not be excluded, so a likelihood ratio of at least 1 septillion was generated, which is very strong support for inclusion.
Were any other comparisons made to any other reference samples?
Yes, we also compared Paul Caneiro. He could not be excluded as well, and the statistic was for at least 43,000, which was strong support for inclusion.
And where it says combination possible,
Yes, they were. It was attempted again to see if they could possibly be there together, and it was possible.
we could turn out a sample E03A. What is that?
This is the exterior of glove 6312.
So is this another glove that we're talking about?
Yes, this is a new glove.
All right. What was your assumed number of contributors called?
2 assumed contributors.
Were they suitable for comparison?
Yes, they were.
Were any visual exclusions made?
Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith Caneiro were all visually excluded.
And what if any comparisons were made?
Sophia Caneiro and Paul Caneiro both could not be excluded. Sophia had a likelihood ratio of at least 100 quadrillion, which is very strong support for inclusion. And Paul Caneiro had a likelihood ratio of at least 45 quadrillion, which is also very strong support for inclusion.
And combination possible would.
Yes, it was possible again that they could both be there.
We could turn to E03B.
Yes,
What sample was that?
that was the interior of that same glove.
Okay. And what was your call on the number of contributors?
2 contributors were obtained.
Were they suitable for comparison?
Both were suitable, yes.
Now, on this particular example, were any visual exclusions able to be made?
No, there were no visual exclusions possible.
Can you tell the jury why that is and what that means?
So the STARmix deconvolution report will give us all of the possible DNA combinations for this sample. Because I could not go through the profile and compare it, and at every location there was a possibility for all of them to possibly be there. So when we can't visually exclude them, then we have to run the likelihood ratio to see if there's support for inclusion or exclusion.
And why was that a possibility for all of the reference samples to be there?
Based on the deconvolution report, their genotype or their allele calls were all present in some combination, either from an unknown or from one of the profiles or one of the genotypes that were listed.
Now, does that have anything to do with the fact or with the amount of information or the amount of the sample that's there?
Yes, often when there is a low-level sample, some of the information is missing. So STARmix can see that, and they will then have the possibility of an unknown. We call it a Q for unknown.
Now, because you were unable to visually exclude any of the reference samples, what did you do?
We then ran all of them and created a likelihood ratio for each of them.
Okay. And what, if any, comparisons were performed?
Jennifer Caneiro could not be visually excluded, so her statistic was assuming a mixture of 2 individuals. This mixture DNA profile obtained is at least 480 times more likely if it originated from 2 unknown, unrelated individuals than from Jennifer Caneiro and 1 unknown, unrelated individual.
What does that mean?
It means that it's more likely that it's from 2 unknowns than from Jennifer and 1 unknown.
So is that likelihood ratio supporting inclusion of Jennifer or exclusion?
It is moderate support for exclusion.
What was the next comparison that was run?
Jesse Caneiro was the next one run, and he also had strong support for exclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 37,000.
Okay, and how about the next one?
Sophia Caneiro was then compared. She could not be visually excluded, and she had support for inclusion, very strong support for inclusion, with a likelihood ratio of at least 750 quintillion.
What was the next comparison?
Keith Caneiro could not be visually excluded. He had moderate support for exclusion with a likelihood ratio of 630, at least 630.
And what was the final one?
The final one was Paul Caneiro showed strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 400,000.
Where it says combination possible, what was your answer?
Yes.
Okay, and what do you mean by that?
In this case, we always compare only the ones that are showing support for inclusion into the profile. So again, we just compared to see if Sophia and Paul could be there together, and yes, they could be.
If we could turn to the next sample, E04A.
Yes.
And if you could just tell us, what is that?
This is the exterior of glove 6-3-2.
So this is now another glove?
Yes.
What was your call for the number of contributors here?
There were 2 contributors observed.
And were they suitable for comparison?
Yes, they were.
Did you make any visual exclusions?
Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith were all visually excluded.
And what, if any, comparisons did you then make?
Sophia was not be excluded, and she had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 980 sextillion.
And was there another conclusion or comparison that you drew?
Paul Caneiro also had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 200 million.
Okay, and where it says combination possible?
Yes, they were both. It was possible for both of them to be present.
Now, EO4B is not on this chart, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and what was EO4B?
U4B was the inside of that same glove.
And what happened with the inside of that glove?
That sample was screened for human DNA, and the results were below the limit of our detection, and it wasn't processed further.
Sample E05A, what is that?
U5A is the exterior of 632, glove 632.
Okay. And what was your call on the number of contributors?
We found there to be evidence of 3 contributors, and only contributor 1 was deemed to be suitable for comparisons.
And why is that?
There was too little information for the other 2 contributors.
Did you make any visual exclusions?
Jennifer, Jesse, Keith, and Paul were all visually excluded from that sample.
When you say that they were visually excluded from that sample, which contributors are they excluded
We
from?
only compare to the ones suitable for comparison, so they were all excluded from contributor 1.
So are you able to make any conclusions or any determinations about the other 2 contributors that were not suitable for comparison?
No, we made no conclusions about them.
Okay, and did you make any comparisons in this case or in this sample?
Yes. Oh, we are on EO5A, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so Sophia could not be excluded. She had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 720 sextillion.
Now, sample E05B, I don't see that on this chart.
That was another one that screened below our limit of detection, and we did not process it further.
We could turn to sample E06A.
Yes. EO6A was the exterior of glove 632.
Okay, and what was your call on the number of contributors?
There were 2 contributors.
Were they suitable for comparison?
Yes, both of them were suitable.
Were any visual exclusions made?
Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith Caneiro were all visually excluded.
What, if any, comparisons did you make to the reference samples?
Sophia and Paul both could not be excluded. Sophia had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 870 sextillion. And Paul had strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 21,000. And they both could be present in that sample as well.
Now, E06B, what is that?
This is the interior of that same glove.
What was your call on the number of contributors?
2 contributors that were both suitable.
Did you make any visual exclusions in this case?
Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith Caneiro were all visually excluded from this profile.
Okay, and what, if any, comparisons did you make?
Both Sophia and Paul were not excluded. Sophia had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 19 quadrillion. And Paul had also had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 49 billion, and they both could be present in the sample.
The next sample is E07A.
This is the exterior of black glove 632.
And is this sample, so E07, is that the last glove?
This is the last glove,
The
correct?
sixth glove?
Yes, the sixth glove.
What was your call on the number of contributors?
There were 2 contributors.
And were they suitable for comparison?
Yes, they were.
Now, were you able to make any visual exclusions on this sample?
No, we were not able to make any visual exclusions, so they were all run. A likelihood ratio was run for each of the references submitted.
Okay, can you go through and tell us what those likelihood ratios were?
Yes, Jennifer had moderate support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 2.6 thousand. Jesse had limited support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 85. Sophia had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 48 billion. Keith had moderate support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 9,000. And Paul had moderate support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 1.9 thousand.
Now, if all of the reference samples, if there's support for inclusion for all of them, but your call on the number of contributors is only 2, how does that happen?
Just means that given the DNA profile that we obtained from the mixture, it is possible that none of these people could be visually excluded.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
to cut you off.
no, that's,
Now, what, if anything, did you do in regards to running these samples together?
so each combination of people, so Jennifer and Jesse, Jennifer and Sophia, all the way down, all of the combinations were run to see if it was possible for any of them to be there together.
And what were your conclusions after all of those combinations were run?
The only possible combination was Sophia and Paul.
A sample E07B I see is not on this chart, but what is that sample?
That is the interior of that same glove.
Okay, and what happened with that sample?
That one was also below our limit of detection. It was not processed further.
We can turn now to sample E09A.
What is that?
A is the swab of reddish stain from the south side of the kitchen island.
And what was your call on the number of contributors for that?
We only obtained 1 contributor for that.
Was that contributor suitable for comparison?
Yes, it was.
Were any visual exclusions made?
Yes. Jennifer, Sophia, Keith, and Paul were all visually excluded.
And so then what, if any, comparisons were made?
So Jesse was not excluded, and he had very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 34 quintillion.
We could turn to sample E10A. What sample is that?
EO10A is the DNA swab of reddish stain from the lower kitchen cabinet.
What was the number of contributors that you called on this sample?
We found there to be 2 contributors, and they were both suitable for comparisons.
Were you able to make any visual exclusions?
Yes, Jennifer, Keith, and Paul were all visually excluded from the sample.
So then what, if any, comparisons did you make?
Both Jesse and Sophia were not excluded, and there was very strong support for inclusion for Jesse with a likelihood ratio of at least 71 septillion. And for Sophia, there was also very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 45 septillion.
Did you run them together?
Yes, and it was possible for them both to be there.
The last sample, E11A, what is that?
This is the swab of reddish stain from the pull-out drawer just below the sink.
And what was your call on the number of contributors for that sample?
There were 2 contributors, and only contributor 1 was found to be suitable for comparisons.
Did you make any visual exclusions?
So yes, Jennifer, Jesse, Keith, and Paul were all visually excluded from contributor 1.
And what, if any, comparisons did you make with regard to the reference samples?
For Sophia, she was not excluded, and there was very strong support for inclusion with a likelihood ratio of at least 990 sextillion.
And the combination where it says not NA,
Only one person was suitable for comparison, only one contributor, so there was no combination possible.
Did that conclude your testing on that first batch of items that came to you on June 18th of 2020?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as S497, S499, S460, and S465, and make sure council.
if you could please take a look at S497 first, and if you could just tell us what that is.
This is the supplemental report for the additional testing that was submitted at a later date.
So what is the date on that report?
The date is May 6, 2021.
Is there a lab number on there?
Yes,
What is that?
it is CCA 2076-0119.
Is that your report that you authored?
Yes, it is.
Was it technically reviewed?
Yes, it was.
Now, what, if anything, did Bode receive from the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office on February 17th of 2021?
We received a black Brooks Brothers scarf separated from item 18086115, which was a pile of charred clothing from potential biological staining from the basement of 27 Tilton Drive. And we also received a hair /fiber A removed from that Brooks Brothers scarf, and then a hair fiber B removed from the Brooks Brothers scarf, and a hair /fiber C removed from the Brooks Brothers scarf.
So just to be clear, you received one scarf and then 3 hairs?
Yes.
I'm going to ask if you can look at what's in front of you, S499. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is the case submission form.
What is listed on there?
This is the billing, report mailing address, evidence return, authorized points of contact, and then case background and instructions, and then a list of the items that I listed from the report.
Okay, is there a lab number on that document?
Yes, it is CCA 2076-0119.
Is that the same lab number that's on the report?
Yes, it is.
And then if you could finally look at S465, do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the chain of custody associated with those items being submitted.
Is there a lab number on there?
Yes, it
Is that the
is.
same one?
It is the same one.
Did you perform DNA analysis on any of the items that you just referred to in your report?
Yes, it did.
And if you could, tell us what type of DNA analysis you performed.
We did DNA analysis just like the other ones, but instead of using STARmix, we used manual interpretation.
Okay, and why is that?
Because they were, it was a single major contributor, and it was suitable for manual interpretation.
If you could just refresh us with regards to manual interpretation versus STARmix. Why would you use manual interpretation on certain samples and STARmix on others?
Sometimes it's just that if it's a single source, it may be easier. It's not, one is not right and one is not wrong. It's just a matter of sometimes it's not suitable for STARmix where it can be used for manual, and sometimes it's just, it's easy to do the manual interpretation.
So I'm going to refer your attention to item E12. What is that?
E12 is the black Brooks Brothers scarf.
And underneath there, do you see where it says E12A and then B and then C and
Yes.
then B?
We did 4 separate samplings of that scarf, which was a quarter of scrapings from the entire surface, and it was split into 4 different samples.
Of those 4 scrapings, which, if any, did you analyze? So actually, all of them were analyzed because they are all from the same item.
due to the size of the sample, they were split into 4 samples, but then later they were combined into 1 sample.
What was
So
that sample number?
we designated that sample E12D.
And what, if anything, did your analysis, what, if any, conclusions did you
Actually,
draw from that?
I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Samples E12A, B, and C were extracted but not processed. I read that wrong, sorry.
Just to be clear, there were 4 scrapings of
There are
different
4
areas?
scrapings, and we took one of those forward.
Is the one that you took E12D?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and tell us what you did with that in terms of your analysis and any conclusions that you drew.
The DNA profile obtained for sample E12D is consistent with a mixture of at least 2 individuals, including a major female contributor, female 1, and at least 1 male contributor. The deduced major component DNA profile matches the DNA profile obtained from Sophia Caneiro, and the probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual with this DNA profile is at least 1 in 14 octillion in the U.S. population. Jennifer, Jesse, Keith, and Paul were all excluded as possible contributors of the major component, and due to the limited data obtained, no conclusions could be made on the minor alleles.
Thank you. And finally, was there one more item that you tested that's listed on your report?
E13,
What is that?
that is the hair fiber A removed from the Brooks Brothers scarf.
And tell us about your analyses and any conclusions that you drew with regard to that hair.
The partial DNA profile obtained was consistent with a female contributor, female 1. This partial DNA profile matches the DNA profile obtained from Sophia Caneiro, and the probability of randomly selecting an unrelated individual with this DNA profile is at least 1 in 4.1 octillion in the U.S. population, and that Jennifer, Jesse, Keith, and Paul were all excluded as being possible contributors of the partial DNA profile.
Thank you.
I think nothing further, Judge.
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Ms. Reid.
Good morning.
So I want to start off with, we heard, obviously, the samples that were being tested here were compared were Jennifer Caneiro, Keith Caneiro, Paul Caneiro, Sophia Caneiro, Jesse Caneiro, correct?
Correct.
And obviously, they all have the same last name, and we know that they're related, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we heard some testimony yesterday, and maybe you would agree, generally speaking, when we're talking about relatedness, those who are related to each other, such as family members, they're going to have more commonly an overlap or shared alleles than, let's say, random, unrelated people from the population.
That is correct, yes.
And specifically, first-degree family members would have even more shared alleles than, let's say, extended family.
Correct.
And when we're talking about siblings, we're talking about a first-degree family member.
Yes.
And same with like a parent and a child, correct?
They are considered to be first-degree relatives, but a parent and a child is obviously going to share much more because you get 50% from your mom and 50% from your dad, whereas a sibling, you can share anywhere between nothing and 100%, depending on how the genetics work out.
On average, let's say it's 50%, right?
I think that's probably a little on the high value for 50% is a lot because there's two different individuals that are contributing DNA, and you can inherit a different one each time for each sibling. So,
So it could be less and it could be more.
correct, yes.
Right, okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as D141 if I can approach. And that is an allele chart that was created, I guess, by Bode.
Yes,
Okay, and you've seen this before, right?
yes, I have.
Okay. Permission to publish?
False.
No objection, sorry.
So here, these are the allele charts, again, for, here we have the actual name, so Jennifer, Jesse, Sophia, Keith, and Paul, correct? Correct. All right. Now, I just want to go through each locus, right? I just want to focus on Keith and Paul, because these are the brothers in this case. And I just want to go through what their overlapping alleles are, if you can. So if we're talking about D3S1358, that's the first locus.
Yes.
Where do you see overlapping?
They both share a 15 allele.
So we have a 15 here, and we have a 15 here. And then can we also highlight this 15 as well, because it could match?
Yes.
And then when we're talking about VWA, where do you see the overlapping alleles?
They have the same profile.
So they both have a 1418 and a 1418, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then how about the next locus, D165539?
They have the same profile.
And what about the next locus, CSFIPO?
They have the same profile.
Okay. And what about the next one, TPOX?
They have the same profile.
I'll skip over that next couple because they're not tested, and this is just the
Right.
XY chromosome. So the next relevant locus, D8, S1179. Do you see any overlap?
They share the 12.
And what about D21511 or S11?
They have the same profile.
And the next one?
D18, they share the 15.
And the next one?
The next one, they have the same 11, which is that's not included in the STARmix, but
We can skip it.
Okay,
How about the one after that?
D2, they share the 16. Wait, sorry, they share the 11.
This here, right?
Yes.
And then we have this. And the next one?
They share a 16.
And what about the next one?
They share the 9.
And the one after that?
They share the 21.
What about the one after that?
They have the same profile.
And do they have the same profile for the next one?
Yes, the next two.
The next two. And what about D7S820?
They share the 10.
Okay. And it looks like the next one,
There is no overlap.
no overlap.
And the next one is no overlap. But then D1 they have the same profile.
The 13.
The 13, 17. They have the same profile for the next 3. And then the last one, they share a 9.
All right. So, can we agree that at least for these two brothers, there is a substantial amount of overlap in their alleles?
Yes.
Can we agree that it is more than 50%?
Yes.
Would you believe me if I said it's approximately 70%?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so when you mentioned earlier that, you know, it could be less, it could be more, in this particular case, we know that it's more than 50%, and in fact, it's, you know, fairly higher than
Yes.
50%.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, do you want to capture that, or do we, I can just, no, we can keep it on here, it's fine. So then I want to talk about So S496 was your report. I'm going to just focus on one page of the report, which I've singled out and marked as D140. And I think you recognize this. It's already been published.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to actually put this back on me. I'm going to put this here. I just want to go through this as well. So this column here, where it says assumed number of contributors, that is that's a visual designation or visual determination?
Yes, we make the determination based on the number of alleles that are present in the profile, as well as the heights of each of the alleles help us determine the number of contributors that are present in the profile.
Okay. So that's something that you decide visually,
Yes.
and that's not something determined by STARmix, correct?
Correct.
So when you ultimately run the program, the STARmix program, you are inputting that information.
Correct.
And you're telling STARmix, I want you to assume that there are 2 contributors and then come up with these likelihood ratios, correct?
Correct.
And so for some of these samples, you're telling STARmix, I want you to assume there's 2 contributors. In that one instance, you're telling, or in a couple instances, it looks like you're telling STARmix you want to assume 3.
Correct.
And so the STARmix likelihood ratios are dependent upon the number of contributors that you input.
Yes. Well, the deconvolution is dependent on the number of contributors, and then that affects the likelihood ratio.
If you had erroneously put in a 6, for example, it would change the output.
We wouldn't have been able to process it as a 6, but say if I put 4, then it would have changed the deconvolution report to try to better fit to that number of contributors.
Okay. Because I think your threshold is 4, right?
Yes, our
Okay, we
threshold
don't
is
do
4.
higher than 4?
We do not higher than 4.
All right, so if we had, let's say, one of the assumptions as a 2, but you doubled it erroneously and you did 4 instead, again, that would change the deconvolution report and the data you receive and ultimately the likelihood ratios.
Yes, but I think it's important to note that the STARmix software will usually tell us, there's diagnostics to let us know that we got the right number of contributors. So if I put 2 and it was supposed to be 4, it's going to tell me that something is off. There's just not enough data there.
But generally speaking, it's possible to sometimes underestimate the number of contributors, correct?
Yes.
And so sometimes you might think that it's 2 and it's really 3. I'm not saying that happened in this case. I'm just saying it's something that can happen, right?
It's something that can happen. We base it on the profiles that we obtain. Like I said, both the number of alleles as well as the peak heights. We take the profile as a whole and we look at it to try to determine the number of contributors that are present.
And we also know that, generally speaking, when we're dealing with related individuals with more overlapping alleles and sometimes many overlapping alleles, that increases the potential chance that you have, not you personally, but that there's been an underestimation of the number of contributors, correct?
Yes, it's something that we have to take into consideration when we're dealing with related individuals.
So if we look at this chart here, and for example, if we start here, we know that you determined there were 3, right, contributors.
Correct.
And these 3 people, Jennifer, Jesse, and Keith, you visually excluded.
From the suitable contributors, so contributors 1 and 2, they were excluded from those.
Okay. But we also know that there is a 3rd contributor in that sample whom we don't know who it is.
Correct.
And that's because the data was too small, too, what's the word?
Limited.
Limited data, okay. And another interesting thing we see here is that in this sample, you designated that there were 2 contributors, correct?
Correct.
And yet, all 5 people in this sample had an inclusion, correct?
Correct.
Now, I understand you then ran it through a separate, I guess, part of the STARmix program to see who could be potentially found together in the sample?
It's not a separate part. It's doing the same exact processing as for determining the likelihood ratio. It's just putting both of them in there instead of individually.
Okay, it's a second step to the calculation, is that fair to
It's
say?
an additional calculation. So we calculate them each individually, and then we do them together to see if we get a positive number or support for inclusion, that would indicate that it's a possibility that they are there together.
Okay. These numbers are relatively on your verbal scale lower though, correct?
Correct.
So we have one that's kind of high, 48 billion, right? And I mean, 48 billion sounds high, but would you agree with me that, when we're dealing with billions, we're talking about 9 zeros, but when we're talking about like a septillion or a sextillion, we're talking about 24 zeros or 27 zeros.
Yes, they're significantly different.
So even though it might sound like a high number, it's not nearly as high as some of these other numbers up here, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so 48 billion is like the highest one we have, and it's relatively high, but not super high. And then we have 2.6 thousand, 9,000, 1.9 thousand, and 85. And those are all relatively low, comparatively speaking, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the fact that we have 5 inclusions, putting aside whether or not they could be found in the sample together, I want to focus on just that aspect first. Would you agree with me that that's demonstrative of the notion that when we're dealing with the way that STARmix works, right, we're giving it hypotheses.
Correct.
It's not like we are matching a sample. I think you call it manual interpretation. So manual interpretation is more like the traditional DNA analysis. Is that right?
It's the non-software version.
Is it what has primarily been used in labs for many years until more recently?
Yes.
Okay. And in that, when we're dealing with manual interpretation, we're looking at a source profile, right? A sample.
Either a single source or a deduced profile is what we're looking at for random match probability.
Okay.
Yes.
And so let's say there was a pen left at a crime scene, right? And you're going to take the profile off of the pen, right? And it's unknown at that point in time who it belongs to, the profile.
Okay.
And then you get a reference sample, right?
Okay.
And the reference sample is what, let's say, the law enforcement is giving to you, and they're saying, this is a reference sample for, Mike Jones, right? And we know it's Mike Jones because we took the buccal swab, right?
Yes.
And so the reference sample is always going to be a complete DNA profile.
Not always, but ideally, yes.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, unless it's very old or degraded, then we will get a full profile.
Okay. Let's say it's a fresh sample. It'll be generally a full profile.
Yes.
And then when you have, let's say, the pen that's given to you from a crime scene, and you get also a fairly full profile from that, you're comparing the two profiles.
We would compare the profile if it were suitable for comparisons.
Okay, let's assume they're both strong profiles, strong data, and you can compare them, right?
Yes.
Then when you compare them, you're basically ascertaining whether or not it's like a match.
Or is it a single source profile or is it a mixture?
Let's say it's single source.
Then yes, we would be seeing if the profile generated from the evidence matched the profile from the reference sample.
And we've heard that you come up with a random probability match statistic. Random match probability.
Yes.
And so in other words, like if the profiles are really strong and it's a single source versus a reference sample, you're able to say, this is a strong match, so we're 1 in 10 trillion likely that this would have to essentially come from this person because it would be so rare for it to belong to anyone else.
Yes, the purpose of the statistic is to kind of help us determine how rare the profile would be.
So if it's 1 in 10 trillion and there's only 6 billion people in the world, we know, okay, it's very rare. It essentially would only have to really come from this person. Is that kind of what?
Well, we don't make that assumption. We give you the statistic to determine the weight behind that. That's for the jury to determine whether they believe it matches.
Okay. Generally speaking, that's the principle behind it as far as the strength of that statistic.
Correct.
And where it comes from and why it's being provided.
Yes.
Okay. But in contrast, when we're dealing with likelihood ratios, what we're dealing with is not that, right?
Well, we're still trying to determine the likelihood of, how likely is it that someone's DNA is within this mixture profile or single source profile. It's calculating a different statistic, but it's still to the same end. We're trying to see how likely it is that that there's a significant match or statistic to support their DNA being in this profile.
Right. However, you're not doing it with random match probability, correct?
No, it's a different statistic, yes.
We're dealing with likelihood ratios.
Correct.
Right? So let's talk about that for a second. So a likelihood ratio is derived from the hypotheses.
Correct.
And so if, again, you have a reference sample, right? And let's say it's Mike Jones, whatever. Then you have this pen, and now it is not a single source, right? Let's say it's a more complex mixture.
Okay.
Okay, and let's say it's 3 contributors that you determine.
Okay.
And the DNA quality isn't great. We're missing some data, okay? In that scenario, what you're doing is you're creating 2 hypotheses, right? And you're saying hypothesis 1 is you want STARmix to tell you, what the likelihood is that Mike Jones's profile is going to be found on this pen, or that it could be found on this pen.
Correct.
Versus the second hypothesis, which is it's not on the pen, it's just 3 random unrelated individuals.
Correct.
Okay. And so, in other words, with the hypotheses, you're only getting the information that you're asking.
Yes.
Specific, and you as the analyst, or whoever the analyst is, they are deciding what hypotheses to input or what information to try to ascertain.
Yes. Based on the reference profiles that we obtain, we are making the hypothesis for the STARmix software to calculate.
So, if you only have, let's say, 1 reference sample, Mike Jones, and the only hypothesis you can really perform in that or analysis is is Mike Jones could he be part of this 3-person mixture? Or is it more likely that he's not, right?
Correct.
What you can't do in that scenario, what you cannot do, is determine, is Sally Jones in that mixture?
We can only determine based on the reference profiles that we receive or obtain.
So without that additional profile, you wouldn't be able to make any hypotheses or use STARmix to draw any conclusions about whether that specific profile is in the mixture, correct?
Correct.
You would have to have that profile.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean, because it's a 3-person mixture, without any more information, it doesn't mean that it's not in the potential mixture, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think that is demonstrated, again, circling back here to EO7A1, is when you're first looking at this, you're like, okay, I believe it's 2 people, and STARmix, without looking at who could be combined, is telling you, look, all of these people could potentially be in this mixture.
Correct.
Because they're family members or shared DNA, right?
Yes, and as a profile that we are interpreting is more partial or less information is there, the more question that we have as to who the contributors could be. So the less information that's there, there's more ambiguity and there's a possibility of more people being there. So because it's like in this situation, many times there are exclusions based on the data that was present or wasn't present for other people. So because some of the information is missing, we may not be able to make the exclusions that we made for some of the other samples because there's just data missing.
Okay. So on the topic of data missing, I'd like to look at, I'd like to focus on a couple of the samples that were done. So I'm going to first approach with E142. Ms. Reid, do you recognize that as a deconvolution report in this case?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and I'll direct your attention to the reference sample number here. Is that E061, E06A1?
Yes.
I'm actually going to take that back from you. Permission to publish?
Objection.
No objection, go ahead.
Okay. So on the first page of this report, just so that the jury can see, it has your lab name at the top, correct?
Correct.
And then it has the title Deconvolution Report,
Yes.
right? And here we can see that's the sample,
Correct.
right? Okay. And that's the E06A1. Now, if I turn to page, actually, we stay on this page for a second. Here on the first page, it talks about the number of contributors, correct?
Correct.
And number 1 is always essentially going to be the major, is that right?
Not always. If we are doing something called conditioning, where all parties are agreeing that we expect someone to be there. So like if it's my jacket, you would expect that I would be there. If you conditioned on me and say I only produce like 4% of the profile, I would still be in contributor 1 because I'm conditioned. So you're automatically assigning the conditioned person contributor 1 spot. But in this case, there were no conditioning, so it would be the profile that is contributing the largest percentage of the profile.
Okay, so because there was no conditioning done in this case, in these reports, the major profile is going to be number 1.
The largest percentage of contribution would be the number one. Major is a word that we use for something else, so I don't want to confuse.
Okay.
So,
Is that not used, is that only used in manual interpretation?
when we're talking about a major contributor, it's usually when someone is contributing 75% or more to the profile. So in this case, that does fit, but it doesn't always fit. Sometimes it might be 55 and, 40,
I see what you're saying.
45. So
But in this case, we have mixture proportion 95%, and then here it's 5%, correct?
correct, yes.
So in this case, because we have 95% of the mixture being essentially derived from this person number one, that's the major?
Correct.
Here.
It's,
in this instance.
it's the largest contributor
Okay.
percentage-wise.
And it's because it's 95%, and then in contrast, contributor 2 is designated as having contributed only 5% to the profile.
Correct.
Okay. Now the profile itself, I'm going to just to remind the jury with 141. Again, when we look at like a more complete profile, we can see how like all or most of these numbers are filled, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. That's why this entire chart is filled with numbers.
Yes.
Because these are the reference samples, and as we talked about, those are generally going to be full profiles.
Generally, yes.
Now here, if we take a look at this is the chart of this sample, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so, similar to the chart we just saw, we have all of the all of the loci listed, correct?
Correct.
Each one of these numbers, which we just went through with Paul and Keith, those are a locus at which you would expect to find the alleles.
Yes.
Okay. And we can see that for the number one contributor, we have it's not a full profile, we're still missing some data, some information, but
Yeah,
we have a good amount.
We have a full profile except for one location that was ignored due to a possible unresolved allele. Everything else is not included in so the Y-indel, amylogenin, and DYS391 are not. So the first three that have dashes,
This one
yes,
and this
the
one,
next one, and then the DYS391,
this one.
yes, those are not included in STARmix interpretation.
Okay. So what we have is this is really the only item of data missing.
And it's only missing because we had a potential unresolved allele, so we ignored the location.
Okay. So generally speaking, it's a fairly full profile.
It's a full profile,
It's a full
yes.
profile. And then, should I cross these off for this one too?
Yes.
Or, okay, so we're not going to do this one, we're not doing this one, we're not doing this one?
Yeah.
And what about the one underneath?
Yes, the one that's highlighted would not be, for both of them, would be ignored.
Okay, so we are ignoring that one? Okay. But so here, what we're missing, like the data that we're missing from the second profile is we're missing this allele on 358, the second allele.
Yes.
And same thing with the one after that,
Yes.
PWA. And then the next, it looks like 1, 2, 3 we're missing.
Well, that's misleading to say that it's missing, because this is the component interpretation summary. So this is where STARmix has pulled with at least 99% confidence that these are definitely assigned to that second contributor. Does not mean that the data is missing. It just means that it was not able to pull with greater than 99% confidence that it is this contributor. There is still data for each of those locations that can be compared.
Okay, so it's not missing in the sense that it doesn't exist, it's missing from this specific chart because STARmix is saying we are not at least 95% confident that we can tell you what belongs in these locations.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it 95 or 99?
It's 99%. Greater, At least 99%.
At least 99, okay.
99, okay.
So then these two were missing from this chart,
Correct.
and then we have this, the second allele at 1045 is missing from the chart.
Yes.
And then 1, 2, 3, 4, the next 4 is missing from the chart.
Correct.
And the last 2 are missing from the chart.
Yes.
And then it looks like the 2 in between that, we're just missing the second allele.
Correct.
Okay. So visually, again, when we're looking at the comparison of contributor 1 and contributor 2, STARmix is 99% confident that this is the most likely profile for contributor 1, and then it's 99% confident that this second profile would contain the alleles that are present.
Correct.
So it's saying we're 99% confident that at this location there would be a 15.
Correct.
We don't know the other one with that level of confidence.
Correct.
Okay, and so forth and so on,
Yes.
right? Now, to take it a step further, or a step back, can you see that okay?
Yes.
So now this is, and again, we're only focusing on contributor 2 because I think contributor 1 is established.
But for contributor 2, these calculations here,
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is where STARmix is giving you the data. It's basically showing its work, so to speak, in the sense that it's saying,
here's each locus broken down, and here are
the most likely possibilities that we came up with and what the level of confidence is that we have for each one.
Exactly. It's showing the STARmix has determined that these are the possible genotypes or allele calls for each of these locations, and they'll give the weight behind it for each of the possibilities.
Okay. And so I just want to go through. I'm going to give you 141 back so you have it. And I just want to go through
this sample. Again, this is
E06A1, which I think was the glove.
The exterior of one of the gloves, yes.
Before we start, actually, I just want to clarify something. When you receive the gloves and you authored in your report, I noticed that you often qualify, it says exterior of glove as received, interior of glove as received. And you do that for each item?
Yes.
That's a glove,
Yes.
right? And again, tell me if I'm wrong, but is the reason that you write it like that because when we're dealing with a latex glove, it's kind of hard to tell what's the true inside and outside, and you're just saying, as I received it, this was the outside, and as I received it, this was the inside.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so as an objective truth, you don't know whether that glove was turned inside out before it was given to you, or and anything like that.
Exactly.
You're just saying, when I got it, this was the outside, and when I got it, this was the inside.
Exactly.
And so if we could just go through this deconvolution report briefly and highlight where Paul Caneiro's alleles fall on this chart. Okay. So if we start with this first one, would he be he's a 15-15, correct?
Right.
So he would actually be number 1.
Yes.
Right, and that's given a 92% weight. And when we go to VWA, which is the next one, he is a 14-18.
Yes.
And that would be 3 down.
Correct.
And and the confidence rate there is 28.65%?
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna round. I'll round up and down.
That's fine.
Okay. So the next one we're dealing with D16S539, and at that location, Mr. Paul Caneiro is a 1313.
Correct.
Okay, and so he would be 3 down, and that's a 15% confidence.
Yes.
And then the next one is the
Move the,
FIFO.
I can't see that.
Sorry,
It's CSF.
CSF. Yeah. And Mr. Paul Caneiro is a 1213,
Correct.
so he's 2nd down,
Yes.
and that is a 16% confidence if we round up.
Yes.
And with TPOX, Paul is a
811.
811. Now, we don't see that on this chart. However, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we see the letter Q, that designates it could be any number.
Exactly.
Okay. So, because we don't see an 811, but we do see a QQ, that could be an 811, right?
Or I would assign it the Q8 because he does have an 8.
Okay, even if it's reversed.
Yes.
Okay. So it would be this one here, the 33%.
Yes.
And then the one after that, 1179,
1213.
he's a 1213, and that's midway down here at 3%. And
D21.
this one, Mr. Caneiro is a
31, 31.2.
31.2. So that's here,
Yes.
and that's at
4%.
4%. Okay, the next one, you can see it.
D18. He's at 15, 16. So it would be the Q15.
Here.
Yes. 13.27.
And then
B19 is just skip those 2 blank ones. And he is a 15.216. So that would be the Q16.
this one?
Yes.
Okay. And now we're at 0.4%,
Correct.
so less than 1%.
Yes.
And we'll look at the next one.
Sorry, did we skip a location?
Oh, I have to do.
We do throw one.
Oh, F is it FGA?
No. Can you go back to the last one we did?
Sure. Oh, this last one here?
Yes. Yes, the one, he is a 6'9".
And there's
100%.
only one listed because it's 100%.
Yes.
And again, what this means is that STARmix is 100% certain that at this particular location, the person would have a 6'9".
Correct.
And back to 1045.
FGA. The top.
Oh,
We
it's
skipped one.
Oh, it's hit that one, okay. And this is another 100%.
Correct.
Okay, so again, STARmix is 100% confident that this would be of the 2 alleles at that location.
Correct.
And the one after that now, Mr. Caneiro is what?
He's a 16, 16.
And that's down here?
Yes.
0.4. So I'll just say less than 1%. And the next one?
He's a 12, 12.
And that's a 36%, if you round up. And the next one?
9/11.
And we're at a little more than 1%. Here.
D7, he is a 10/12, which in this case looks, I can't see the bottom. So it would be a Q10. Up, fourth one down,
Thank you. Okay, and that's at
10%. And then he's a 16/16.
so it's number 1, and it's 25%.
Correct.
So we notice how, sometimes even if it's the top number, the top number is not always 100%, right?
Correct.
It's still giving you, this is the most confident we can be. And when I say we, I mean STARmix.
Yes.
Okay, and we're almost done here. I think this is the last page.
D10, he is a 13/14. Which is 61%.
61.
D1, he is a 13/17.3, which is a 45%.
45.
D12, 18/19, which is the third one down.
And that's 15%. And then I think, is this the last one?
Yes, it is 17/25.
Okay, 17.20, 17,
25, so I guess would have to be the Q25.
is this one down here?
Yes,
Okay, and that would be at 3%.
yes.
Okay. And so just to put it all together here, what we just did was we were looking at the different options that STARmix comes up with and says, these are our most confident statistics that we can provide, and if it's 99% or over, they'll list them, but otherwise it's going to be missing because they can't tell you, STARmix can't tell you with certainty.
It's not missing because it's still used in the calculation. It is not just this information that is used in the calculation. They will apply each of those percentages that weight. They will apply that for each time. If I say, like if it's not on this chart, but it's within that breakdown of all the possible combinations, it will apply that weight for that one location.
Right, so in other words, all of the ones where we saw it was less than 1% or 3% or 50% or 60% or 20%, they're not going to be listed here.
They're not going to be listed there, but they will still be used in the calculation.
Okay. And this calculation was produced a likelihood ratio of 21,000.
I don't have it,
Oh,
so I don't remember. And this was 6A, yes, it was 21,000.
now if we skip up to, let's look at E04A1, because that's a higher number, that's 200 million.
Correct.
Right? I think we have 21,000, that was not the lowest, because the lowest likelihood we have is 1.9.
Correct.
Then we have 21, then we had 43,000,
Yes.
then we have 400,000, I'm just going in like numerical order, and then we have 200 million.
And
So
then the 3.7 quintillion at the top.
yeah, no, right, I'm just saying, before we get to 200 million, there are a bunch of ones in the thousands.
yes.
Right. The quintillion is 18 zeros.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And the billion, again, is 9 zeros.
Correct.
And the quadrillion would be 15 zeros.
Yes.
And again, the sextillion that we're dealing with, the sextillion is 21 zeros and the septillion is 24 zeros.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay. So
Ms.
some-
Salone, I don't mean to stop you, but we're going to take our mid-morning break. We're at that time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take the mid-morning break. We'll give you 20 minutes and then we'll come back out. So please don't discuss the case or do any research, and keep the lights on in there. It's our IT person up. I don't know why it's going out of focus.
I think the autofocus turned off at some point, but I don't know why. I don't know why it went out the way it did. I'm not sure.
It's clearer now than it was. But even at the last questions you had, Ms. Mastalone, it was a little blurry. So I just want to make sure the jurors can see it. Again, it's not about me if I can see it. It's about making sure they can. So, all right. Just you have 20 minutes. Just please, you can be back in your seat. You don't have to wait and come back in. We'll start back up at 10:35.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Everybody, tea drinkers? It's just not as fun as coffee. Just throwing it out there, just in case.
I like it.
Just saying. All right, we can continue on our cross.
So Ms. Reid, I think where we left off is we had just talked about this chart here. And that was for, again, E06A1. And then if we put this chart back on here, just to show where we're at, we're at this one here, right, with the 21,000?
Yes.
So I guess if we're bringing it back to the pen analogy, perhaps, what this tells us here is that with respect to Sophia, right, there's an 870 sextillion more greater likelihood that her DNA would be, if this pen had a mixture of two, right, that her DNA would be on this pen, hypothetically, as opposed to two other random people.
Correct, yes.
And then when we focus on Paul, the likelihood that his DNA would be a part of this mixture is 21,000, as opposed to the likelihood that his DNA is not included.
Correct, yes.
Okay. But let's say there's another person, right, another brother that's not listed here, and we don't know his alleles, we don't know his DNA profile. Because this number is 21,000, especially, would you agree that what we don't know is the likelihood of what that person's DNA is in the profile compared with the likelihood that it's not?
Correct. Without their profile, we would not be able to calculate a likelihood ratio.
However, it's possible, right, and I'll do it both ways, right? It's possible that he's excluded, correct?
Yes.
It's possibly you could visually exclude him.
Correct.
It's also possible that he has a likelihood ratio of less than 21,000.
It could have a likelihood ratio of less than or greater than. It really depends on his profile.
And that was my next question. It's also possible that he could have a likelihood ratio of higher than 21,000.
Yes, it just
Correct.
depends on his profile compared to the evidence.
All right. But we just don't know.
We don't know.
Now again, just to focus on the 200 million example, again, I'm just skipping over the thousands. I'm not going to go to the super low ones, and I'm not going to go to the super high ones.
Okay.
I'm just choosing a few for now. So with respect to, that would be E04A.
show you what's been marked as D143. And do you recognize that as the deconvolution report for that sample?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Now, I won't tediously go through all of those alleles again. I'm just going to skip to the chart. Here. On page 5 of 9. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. And so in this scenario, can you just remind me again which ones we're crossing off? It's Yindel and Amel,
Yes.
and it's, are we crossing these off?
Those two, yes.
These two as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just cross these off here too. And here. So in this sample where we have a likelihood of 200 million, right?
Yes.
I'm just gonna, if it's okay with you, highlight these alleles, spots, locus, these locus. I'm gonna highlight these loci. How about loci? Right there. Okay. And again, just as a visual representation, I know you've indicated it's not that we don't have any data, right? But rather, when STARmix is producing its calculations, and here we're also talking about contributor 1 is contributing 97%
Yes.
to the mixture, and contributor 2 is 3%
Correct.
to the mixture.
Correct.
And in this scenario, STARmix is saying that it can be 99% or more confident that there's a 17 at this locus, a 14 at this locus, a 12 at this locus, and then there's only, I think, 2 loci where it's giving a complete allele set.
Yes.
But other than that, STARmix is saying we can't say with 99 or more % confidence which alleles would or should be here.
Correct.
And I guess just to be clear, is it fair to say that this concept is very different than the random match probability? In the sense that with random match probability, you're always going to be a certain level of confidence as to the profile.
Well, we're looking at a deduced contributor in that case, where that may be deduced by the software, but we're not looking at that. We're looking at all of the genotype possibilities. So just because that column has those deduced profiles, we are looking at it, all the possibilities from when we make comparisons. So it is quite different than a likelihood ratio because we are looking for random match probability, we are looking to see if all of the alleles that are in that either single source contributor or deduced contributor match the profile from the reference. If they do, then we look to see how rare that allele is in the population, and then we calculate a statistic based on that. Where this is, we're looking at how likely each of these genotype combinations are, and then that is used to help calculate the statistic. It's not how rare they are as much as it is like how much weight is given based on this likelihood ratio.
And when we're looking at the individual categories, I think, like when we were looking at what we looked at earlier when we were highlighting the alleles, again, I think we agreed that this is how STARmix is kind of showing its work, and it's saying these are the most likely alleles that we STARmix can come up with, and it's assigning a percentage of weight.
Yes.
And we know that STARmix is a software, correct?
Correct.
And it uses a mathematical algorithm.
Yes.
Now,
the mathematical algorithm is not, if we were to think about it as like a giant equation, right? It's not something that any human can really sit down and like try to work out longhand.
We can do like individual calculations, but the number of calculations that they do in the time is
Simultaneously.
It's not possible for a human being to do that.
Would a human being even be able to do all of those simultaneous calculations like in a lifetime?
Probably not. I don't imagine so.
Okay, so it's fairly complex.
It's complex, yes.
And we're relying on that mathematical model to give us that information.
We're relying on it to calculate the deconvolution and to calculate the likelihood ratio.
And with respect to the likelihood ratio, I just had a couple questions about that. The likelihood ratios that were provided in this case from Bode were, and please feel free to correct me if I get the phrasing wrong, but again, it's like hypothesis 1 is that the contributor is the person of interest, the person of interest and one other contributor would be a part of this two-person mix, versus it's two random, unrelated individuals are a part of this two-person mix. That's the comparison you're making.
As long as you're not taking, the person of interest would just be the reference that we're comparing. So not necessarily a person of interest as most people think of it, like a suspect. It is looking at the reference to see if they are there with one or two other individuals versus 2 or 3 without them there.
When you draft the hypotheses, though, do you label them as like defense hypothesis, prosecution, prosecutor, state, or something?
No, we don't. It's
No,
just we either will drag the reference into the software, and if it is a conditioned person, then we will click an option that says everybody agrees that this is here, and then the software basically has HP HD.
Okay. So ultimately, if we define person as interest as the reference sample, right? We can just say that. So
Yeah.
hypothesis 1 is the reference sample if it's a two-person mixture. Hypothesis 1 is reference sample person is this is the likelihood that they are part of this mixture versus the likelihood that the reference sample is not part of the mixture, but rather that the mixture is comprised of two random, unrelated individuals.
Correct.
Now, STARmix does have some sort of capability where the analyst could use the program to ascertain a hypothesis of whether, instead of unrelated random individuals, whether there's a related individual in the sample.
We, at the time of reporting this, we did not have that ability. We did not use that calculation on the STARmix software. We are looking at comparison of the reference to basically the population of random, unrelated, unknown individuals.
And when you say we didn't do that, you're talking about the lab, correct?
Bode did not. There is a section of the report that has some information about related individuals, and that was not utilized by, or is not utilized by our laboratory.
And so just to be clear, it's that the software is capable of doing it, but you and your lab, you as an analyst or the analysts at your lab weren't trained on it. It's not been validated by the lab, so it's not a function of the software that you use.
We were not trained in it to the point that I am not even fully aware of exactly what it's saying. It's not something that we were trained in at all.
Okay. All you know is that there is this potential aspect of the software that deals with related individuals as opposed to unrelated individuals.
Yes.
Okay. And in this case, again, you're aware that all of the reference samples that you have, Keith, Jennifer, Sophia, Jesse, and Paul, are in some way related to each other.
Yes. Can I add something?
I think maybe on redirect or.
Okay.
The only other thing I want to ask you is, obviously you can only test what's given to you.
Correct.
Right, and we talked today about, I think, gloves and maybe jeans, scarf, some hairs.
Yes.
Okay. You were never given any samples related to like the inside of a vehicle or a gas can or anything other than what you talked about today.
Correct.
And when you obviously when you perform your analysis, you can only report on what you receive and what ultimately you're able to ascertain from the item.
That is correct, yes.
And one last thing I just want to clarify. Tell me if I'm wrong. The reason that you're performing the analysis in this case is it because much of the DNA mixtures that we're dealing with were complex in that there's more than one contributor, or that it's a lower level of DNA, some sort of DNA mixture that would be more difficult, if not unable to be analyzed in the traditional manual sense?
Not necessarily. It just depends on, we don't know what we're getting. When we process a sample, we will determine the best way to process it based on the profiles that we obtain. Some of our clients request STARmix to be used regardless. And some clients haven't brought STARmix online, so they're not able to use it. And we can sometimes say, okay, if we're not expecting this to go into a CODIS database, then we suggest using STARmix because it will aid with this. But it doesn't mean that we have to use it. It really depends on the profiles and the client and what their requests are.
Right. In this specific case.
In this specific case, I believe STARmix was. We talked about using STARmix.
And some of these mixtures obviously have, let's say, you've identified 3 contributors, right?
Yes.
And that's something that STARmix would be better equipped to.
Yes, if we're hoping to make conclusions on minor alleles when there's mixtures of more than one individual, then STARmix can be useful for that. A lot of these, the contributor 1 was a major contributor, so we could have manually interpreted it and still been able to make conclusions on that manually. But because of STARmix, we were able to make conclusions on some of the minor alleles as well.
And these are profiles, so when we're dealing with the minor profiles, where it's like less quantity, lower quality type DNA, that is something that STARmix is equipped to, I guess, analyze as opposed to manual
That's
analysis.
correct. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Redirect.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Reid, a little while ago on cross-examination, you asked if you could say something else. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You were stopped from saying something else?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you were going to say?
I was just going to say that just because we don't utilize that section, my impression is that is giving you the likelihood of how, if another a related person, not the references that you have, how likely it is that unknown relative would be there. It doesn't change anything about the relatives that were tested.
Now, you were asked a question about STARmix being complex because it does a lot of calculations. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you know about how many labs are using STARmix today currently?
I don't know any number, but I know that most states have brought it online. And so it is a very expensive endeavor to bring it online. So the number is increasing all of the time.
Now, does
each and every lab that utilizes STARmix have to validate STARmix in their lab prior to being able to use it?
Yes, in order to use it and pass accreditation standards, you have to have it validated for your laboratory.
And do they do numerous and painstaking tests with samples that known samples, essentially?
Yeah, so validation involves using, creating different samples, trying to create as many scenarios similar to real casework that we would see to try to test the system and make sure that it's accurate.
Now, the random match probability and then the likelihood ratio, those are two separate statistics?
Yes, they are.
Is there one that's more reliable than the other of those two?
No, they're both reliable and accepted in the community.
Now, you were cross-examined on two samples in this particular case, and one of them was E06A, where the allele call in the deconvolution report, where there were few alleles. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And in those instances, was the likelihood ratio higher or did it trend lower?
It would trend lower. The less information that you have for each of the contributors will result in a lower likelihood ratio.
Okay, and is that something that's expected by you?
Yes, it is.
Now, there were some samples, I'm going to refer you to E03A, which is one of the gloves, where the likelihood ratio supported inclusion of the defendant at 45 quadrillion. Is that right?
I don't have that with me, but I could
Sure.
look at my
Hold it
report.
up on the screen. Judge permission?
Sure.
You say EO3A? Yes, it was 45 quadrillion.
Okay, and then there was another sample that was pointed out, E06B. What was the likelihood ratio supporting the defendant for inclusion on that glove?
It was 49 billion, at least 49 billion.
Do you recall being asked about the number 49 billion?
No, I do not.
You don't remember on cross being asked about 49 billion and how it's low in relation to the other numbers, like the
Yes.
sextillions? You recall
Yes, I
that?
do.
So, just to put it in context, how many people, if you know, are on the face of this earth?
I think it's about 8 billion,
8 billion.
8 to 9 billion.
And here there's the likelihood ratio supporting inclusion for the defendant of 49 billion.
Yes.
You were asked about some common allele sharing between Keith and Paul. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And did you know that going into your analysis that there was common allele sharing?
Yes, because they were related, we were aware that there was going to be some sharing happening.
And did you have the allele charts for each individual prior to running the mixtures through STARmix?
We have them prior because they were received even before we had the evidence, but we don't look at them until after the deconvolution. We do analysis and interpretation of the DNA profiles. We make our conclusions based on the number of contributors, and then we run them in the STARmix. Sometimes in this case, because of related individuals, we may have to take those into account because we want to see if there's any allele sharing issues that are happening that would make it inappropriate for us to run STARmix.
Did you notice anything, any problems, or was anything flagged by STARmix or by you as the analyst in terms of any overlapping alleles because of the familial relationship?
No, the peak heights that we obtained were consistent with allele sharing, but each of the individuals had enough differences that they were able to be visually excluded in most of the cases. So it made the analysis fairly easy because most of these had instances where they were visually excluded.
So along those lines, were there actually 5 samples here where the defendant had a likelihood ratio supporting inclusion, but his brother was able to be visually excluded by you?
There's 1, 2, 3, 6. Yeah, 6 that he was able to be visually excluded, and 1 where he was excluded by the software.
Yeah, there was some discussion on how when the contributors share a lot of alleles, that can sometimes cause the analyst to underestimate the number of contributors. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, but based upon your years of experience and the thousands of DNA samples that you've run, how confident were you on your number or your call for the number of contributors in each and every one of these samples?
I was very confident based on the number of alleles present, the peak heights of each of the locations, they were consistent with the number of contributors that I determined.
Nothing further.
So, going back to your first response on redirect, I think you said that your understanding with respect to the likelihood ratio with related individuals would simply tell you, can you explain that again?
Basically, so like you use the example of another brother. So that section, from how I understand it, is that it explains the likelihood of if it were, it has listings of a sibling, a parent, uncle. It gives you the likelihood ratio of someone else of that relationship also being included. But like I said, it does not change the results for the references that we actually have present and did testing for.
So in other words, instead of saying there's the hypothesis 1 is the likelihood that Paul Caneiro is on this pen versus hypothesis 2, likelihood that Paul Caneiro is on this pen, or that Paul Caneiro is not on this pen, but rather unrelated random individuals, we're talking about is it possible that Paul Caneiro is on this pen along with a related individual?
No, I believe that it is speaking to this is the likelihood ratio if this was a brother of Paul Caneiro and one other individual, unrelated, unknown individual, versus no one being related. So it's not including the reference. It's as if we're looking at the likelihood ratio of it being someone of that relationship.
Okay. And is that anything you would ever do in a one-person mixture? Or you
No,
would
it would
do
not.
it in a two-person mixture or more?
I mean, generally, it's, you have 100% certainty on a single source profile if you're making a comparison. But if you're making, if we don't know who the individual is, if nothing matches the references, then we don't know who that belongs to.
And is it something you would ever do for the major or only the minor?
It's done for the, it's calculating against the likelihood ratio of the contributor spot. Like, so contributor 1, contributor 2.
Right, okay. So in other words, it would allow the program to give you information about whether there is any what the likelihood is of an individual related to the person, let's say Paul Caneiro, is found in this mixture.
Correct.
Okay. But again, that wasn't done here, right?
No, it was not.
Okay. And with respect to the 49 billion,
I'm just going to put this up. You have the front table.
okay. So the prosecutor asked you about this sample EO61, which is the 49 billion.
Yes.
Or B1 rather. And the prosecutor asked you how many people there are on the planet, right?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. Now, in putting that aside, right, in random match probability, if the statistic is 1 in 49 billion, right, what that means is, tell me if I'm wrong, that the likelihood of this DNA profile belonging to anyone else other than the suspect is 1 in 49 billion, correct?
It's the probability of randomly selecting a person from the U.S. population that would have the same profile as the evidence.
And again, I know you're saying that's not technically where you would, as the analyst, draw a more conclusive, like you wouldn't take it to that next step. But again, the implication is that because there's only 6 billion people, if the random match probability statistic is 49 billion, it's way higher. Right, that statistic that this DNA profile could belong to someone other than this person, this is unlikely, right? It's rare.
Yes, it's rare.
Okay, but that's random match probability. That's traditional DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
What this says here with the likelihood ratio is that it is 49 billion times more likely that Paul Caneiro's DNA is part of this two-person mixture than it is that it's other than hypothesis 2, which is it's not included.
Yes.
right? And as we can see, Sophia is at 19 quadrillion, right? Which is
Correct.
higher.
Correct.
So what we don't know is if there is a third person or another person, what their likelihood ratio could be. Could it be higher or lower?
Without testing, we have no way of knowing what their likelihood ratio would be.
So the fact that there's 6 billion people on the planet is really not relevant to the determination of a likelihood ratio with respect to whether this person, what the likelihood that this person is contained in a specific mixture.
No, I think I used that example of the population to try to give some idea of the size of the number.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, but this is not indicative of a random match probability statistic.
Correct. Yeah, some of these numbers are very difficult for people to visualize, so I use it may take 27 billion Earths to get to this number. So it's just to try to, make it a realistic number for people to understand.
And I think in that vein, just briefly, so I think we said earlier a quintillion has 18 zeros, right?
I believe so, yes.
This is focusing on all. 45 quadrillion has 15 zeros.
Yes, I believe.
And 49 billion. Nine zeros.
Yes.
And then we have 43,000, right?
Yes.
That's 3 zeros.
Yes.
And then we have 400,000. That's, I guess, it's like technically 8 zeros, but here it's 7.
Yes.
And 1,900, right?
Yes.
And I think we have 21,000.
And then the 200 million.
And then the 200 million.
3 more zeros.
Okay?
Yes.
And then here, did we agree that sextillion is 21 zeros?
I believe it is. And
And
then
this-
24.
Yes. Okay. So just visually, that's the differences in zeros, right? And again, because we're just dealing with likelihood ratios. What is the likelihood that this person's DNA could be or is in this potential mixture?
Yes.
And lastly, you mentioned on redirect that you, with the family members, you visually were looking for allele sharing and you were considering that
Yes.
as part of your analysis.
Yes.
And I think you also said that you had excluded Keith a variety of times.
Correct.
Again, you can't exclude someone whose profile you don't have.
Correct.
And you can't consider the sharing of alleles with respect to any other family member whose profile you don't have.
Correct.
Anything else?
No, thank you, Judge.
All right, can we turn the lights back on, please? You can step down, thank you.